They asked me to punch a clock, which means nothing to me. I hope it means nothing to you. It seems to me a coincidence that I have been given the subject today, the new heavens and new earth. If you look at the title on the board there, a renovated earth. I'm going to discuss this phrase from the standpoint of what's being said today, even by some brethren, that when the Lord comes again, the earth will be burned off, much the way a forest is, but it will be reborn, recreated, renovated by God, and those who die will live here as the new earth, on the new earth. This will be your heaven in the afterlife. In fact, a couple of them are teaching that when you can live here in the afterlife, you can get your pets back. Your dogs and your cats and your sheep and your rats and whatever other pets you have. You know, Brother Hayes keeps pet snakes or something, he'll get those back. I don't know what your pets are, Ronnie, but I suppose that you'll get those back. We need to look at 2 Peter 3 today. And we're going to look at some of the verses there and make some comments. But I'm going to suggest to us all, this is not a new doctrine. In 1982, seems like 1892, I was studying at the Alabama Christian School of Religion on my Master of Theology degree. That's a 3-year master's degree, above a master's degree. It's a requisite to the Doctor of Ministry program, or was at that time. This particular degree does not exist anymore in seminaries. They now have a Master of Divinity, they call it, which is also a 3-year degree. Well, I went to Brother Cates and I said, he was my chairman of my thesis committee. I said, may I write on the phrase, the new heavens and the earth? He said, yes. And I wrote about 120 pages on this subject, not knowing at all at that time that this was going to become an issue among us. Now, these brethren who are teaching the renovated earth and others like them are now arguing with us that this is not a fellowship issue. If it's not, why are they pushing it? Anybody pushing a doctrine has made it an issue. And so I'm going to try in the best way I can today, being 102 years old, to try to answer this thing for you. Brother Rollo, I got an award the other day, it says on it, older than dirt, so I'm official now. This particular doctrine, it was taught by the Greco-Roman writers in the Intertestament period. In fact, it was one of their most popular doctrines, that the earth will be renovated. Barnes teaches it in his commentary. I've always told my students that the Barnes commentary make good bottoms for parakeet cages. Nothing much else good in them. I wouldn't buy them if I were spending money today. There's also a controversy, and I want you to underline 2 Peter 3:10 and look at the word burned up. Because in some of the manuscripts that have been discovered, the word there is translated discovered. And I want to comment on that as we go along today. And then in most of the manuscripts, the ones that are written in cursive, they have the idea of burned up. And so the old unsealed manuscripts, large letter, square letter manuscripts, you have the idea of discovered. So which is right? Which is the best translation? If you have an American Standard Translation, which I have in my hand here, you will notice that the New Testament is translated in some places differently from the King James translation. The reason is the manuscript evidence. The unseals were the ones the American Standard used. The cursives are the ones, for the most part, that the King James translators used. So what I want to do is take a look at 2 Peter 3 with us. Then I want to comment on, as quickly as I can, on some of those intertestament writers and some of the church writers. Church fathers writers, they also argue for a renovated earth, some of them. In fact, I have in my library the ancient commentaries from the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th centuries, and I read those. I read on the Venerable Bede, and I read a lot of the church fathers' comments on these verses in 2 Peter 3. When you look at commentaries on 2 Peter, Most of them argue that Peter wrote this letter to answer the idea that some of the Christians had from his first letter, that there was going to be a delay in the second coming. And that's why you have so many statements here about this event. If you look at 2 Peter 1:4, you'll find out that the major theme of this text here in 2 Peter is that the world is corrupt. It's corrupt. Let's keep that in mind. That's an important point. The world is corrupt. And you can see that again in chapter 2, verse 12, also chapter 2, verse 19. Why is it corrupt? Well, if you look at chapter 2, verse 10, you'll notice that it's corrupt because of the lust of the flesh. It's defiled. This is a corrupt place. Look around you or listen to the evening news, you'll hear the same kinds of things today. The world is corrupt through human lust. But at the second coming, when he comes again, according to chapter 1, verse 16, something is going to be done. Something about this situation. He says, when he comes, verse 16, chapter 1, what's going to happen, Peter? 3, verse 4. Chapter 3, verse 4. Where is the promise of his coming? It hadn't come yet in Peter's time. They were all concerned about that. Brother Reed already did an excellent job in referring to this idea of uniformitarianism. And they all had that. Everything continues as it were from the foundation of the world. Brother Reed will tell you that when they look at a strata of dirt, you ask them how old it is, they'll say, well, that's 1 billion years old. Well, how do you know it's 1 billion years old? There's a trilobite in it. Well, how do you know the trilobite's that old? He's in that strata. Well, you've got circular reasoning. Because they believe everything has continued as it was. How old was the first tree? How many rings? Let's just ask them that. But anyway, here he says that there's a coming, and then in verse 12 of chapter 3, at that coming, something's going to happen when there will be a fire that will dissolve all the elements. Wow. Why? Well, not only that, not only the elements, but what about the wicked? What's going to happen to them at the second coming? Well, according to chapter 3, verse 7, something will happen to them. They're reserved against the day of judgment and destruction. I want to ask us a question. If you and I are going to live on the earth, where are the wicked going? Come on, you renovated earth people. Where are the wicked going? Is there a place for them? Jesus said so. Matthew 25:46 is the record that they are going away into everlasting punishment. Where? Where? I guess he'll burn off California and send them all there. Well, most of them living there now. There's going to be a destruction, not a renovation. Read the word. A destruction. Look at chapter 2 there, and let me get that up here for you. Look at this now. I should have clicked those others. It's all right, you can read the other one. Look at 2:11. 2 Peter, 1:11. Look what he says here. For thus shall be richly supplied unto you the entrance into the... Now look at this phrase, brothers and sisters. It's the only time it's used in the New Testament. And it's important. It's translated eternal kingdom. But he uses the word aionios, basileia. The words, aionios. He doesn't use the word normally connected to kingdom here. What's he indicating when he writes this? Why did the Holy Spirit tell Peter, when you write about the second coming, you talk about the kingdom where we're going as the aionios, basileia. That points to an end time idea. Something's going to happen that's totally different from what could happen before. We're going into an aionios, basileia. The only time that the kingdom where we're going will be realized is at that moment. It has to be a totally different place. Or Peter's wrong. Take your choice, you only have two. Therefore, everything Peter says in 2 Peter 3 here, or it's recorded here, is an end of all time idea. It's an eschatological idea. And I don't say that lightly because I wrote 28 pages to show that point in that thesis I was talking about. This is so important that I would beg those taking this renovated earth idea to study those two words. And they're going to have to realize that Peter meant this is the end of something. This is it. It's over. It won't be like this anymore. That's what he was trying to tell them about the flood. You people think the earth that then was is like the one now. It is. It's totally different. And the place we're going, Billy, is totally different from the place where we are now. It's the Ionios, Basileia. And I think that I should ask myself the question, why did the Holy Spirit use this only one time? Because it's in the context of end time. It's in the context of something different. Notice chapter 3 now, if you would, and the word with which it begins. It begins with remember. Remember. The idea. 2 Peter 3, 3 and 4. Peter was dealing with some people who thought that there would be no second coming. And they were rejecting the idea of a second coming and just mocking this idea of a Lord coming back. And the very thing they were mocking, I found out in that study of the intertestament writers, that those Jewish writers believed, and if you'll read the book, the apocryphal book of Jubilees, you'll find this, they believed that the new heavens and the new earth would be inaugurated when Messiah came. Well, he disappointed them because he came at a different time in history. What they wanted, and they misread the Old Testament prophets, constantly misread them. The Old Testament prophets said when the Gentiles come in, they'll bring their goods from all over the world into the kingdom. So the Jews had the idea that when the Messiah came, they'd all sit at a long fellowship table, a feast table, and all the Gentiles would serve them. And that's what their idea of the new heavens and new earth would be. And they would be in this great kingdom where everybody would be bringing them food and feeding them. And how's that going to come about? Peter said, it isn't. There's a cosmic catastrophe coming. Going to burn all this stuff, and it won't even be here. Now, what was their idea? They wanted the earth to continue forever, to prove something. Their idea was that the continual existence of the earth was proof that this is sufficient. This is the end of God's creation. That is a carnal idea. My father died a Jehovah's Witness, or claimed to be. And they believe that they're going to live on this earth for 1,000 years. Why? They don't want to go anywhere else. They can't see going anywhere else. They love this place so much, they don't want it to be anything but this place, because this is sufficient. I'll have my little cottage, my little white picket fence. I can go fishing, Billy. I can go hunting. I can just live here, get my dog back. Sounds like a backward country song, doesn't it? Get your dog back and you pick up truth. This is carnal. I have some bad news for all of us this afternoon. You're all going to die. I am too. But every time I talk about heaven, somebody comes and says, I thought you were getting up a bus load now. I didn't want to go that quickly. Do we really want to go to heaven, or do we want to stay here? That's the difference in this doctrine. I don't want to go. I want to stay here. I love it here. And that's why it should just be here forever. Well, when Peter dealt with the flood there, and you can read that in verses 5 through 7, I'm not going to read those for us, but I want us to notice he's dealing with the flood there, but He's dealing with the contention that the universe is stable, and he said it isn't. It isn't sufficient. This place is not stable. Just as God destroyed the old earth, he can destroy this one. We do not live on a stable earth. And when it becomes the new heaven and the new earth, it ceases to be what Peter called the Ionion basileia, because it can't be. It's not sufficient. Fellows, Peter is very definite here, especially in the original language. Look at 2 Peter 3:10 now. In the English, it reads, "But the day of the Lord will come as a thief, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise." Underline that, please. The elements shall be dissolved, with fervent heat, and the earth and the works that are therein shall be, cursed manuscripts, burned up. The Greek terms there are interesting. The heavens will pass away with a great noise. The adverb Peter used there means that the heavens will burn and it will sound like a crackling fire. It will be a noisy situation when the heavens disappear. They will be consumed with flames. He's very specific. But then he says the heavens and, underline and. Students, underline and. If you had English, that's a conjunction. Coordinating conjunction. Whatever happens to the heaven has to happen to the earth. And the heavens are dissolved with a great crackling fire. Sometimes after I got through with all that work on that thesis, I would go to Brother Case and say, I already knew what I knew before I wrote the thing. That the words new heavens and new earth are figurative terms, and they are context terms. Brother Payton did such a wonderful job in explaining context matters. And when you read the phrases 4 times in the Bible, 2 in the Old and 2 in the New, you're reading about something different that's going on there. It doesn't mean the same thing every time you read the phrase new heavens and new earth. When Isaiah used it, in Isaiah 65:17 and 66:22, he was talking about the coming church of Christ. Well, it's not Judaism anymore. Or as you say in Alabama, Judaism. I guess you worship Judy, I don't know. The word is Judaism. My students get all upset with me when I correct them on that. But I don't worship Judy. I'm not Google Pyle. I'm not Gary Grant impersonator. Isaiah 65:17, he says, he's looking for a new heaven and new earth. He's looking for the church of Christ, which is totally different from Judaism. When John saw it, look at Revelation 21:1. I, John, saw a new heaven and a new earth. Former things had passed away, and there was no more. He doesn't mean the briny deep here. Apocalyptic language indicates what John meant there. He said there's no more population. It's not there on that old earth anymore. I don't see it. Something new is happening. I saw that new heaven, the bride coming down out of heaven. Coming down from where? I saw that bride all dressed up coming down from heaven. He sees the church glorified, ready for something brand new, all dressed up like a bride to meet her husband. You remember that Joseph and Mary were betrothed? Legally married, in fact, in a sense. He would have had to put her away with a letter of divorcement. Well, they had not been together yet because the wedding feast hadn't taken place. But on the night of the wedding feast, Joseph would go to the house. He would offer and pay the dowry to her parents. When I was in Africa, the Africans told me that They had a dowry system where you had to pay a cow for every immediate male member of the family. When I met Shadrach Bachuela, I said, how many cows did she cost? He said, 11. He was proud of that. He was married to an 11-cow woman. That was the dowry. Joseph had to pay the dowry, and then they would have a parade down the street, and they would come to Mary's house, and there would be the wedding feast. And the bride adorned to meet her groom. You and I are now legally betrothed to the Christ. We haven't been to the wedding feast yet. And the tables aren't set up here. Oh, what a day. What a glorious day that will be. No population when John saw that new situation. No more seed. Why? They all had come into God's presence to be judged. And either to go and live in that new place or to depart from him. Where? I would like the renovated earth people to tell me, where in the world do the wicked go? This is a comprehensive term, new heavens and new earth. And any future reference to a new heaven and a new earth would be superfluous because I have no context in which to put it. It would be illogical. And notice that the heaven and the earth that is new, look at verse 13 now, is a place where God dwells. So I ask you the question this afternoon, where is God right now? Down here on Main Street? Where is he? Because that's where this new heaven and new earth will be, where he lives. I ought to click that once in a while. I'm 80 years old. Give me a break. This newfangled stuff, I don't know what it's about. I mentioned earlier the extra canonical writings, just quickly. The intertestament writers began to reinterpret Old Testament prophecies, and I just mentioned that. But I want you to look at an apocryphal statement. I think I have it up there. It's 4th Ezra up there on the board. Can you see it? I'll read it to you then. This is an apocryphal book called 4th Ezra. This is chapter 4, verse 12. Here's what Ezra said. It would be better for us not to be here than to come here and live in ungodliness and to suffer and not understand why. They looked at the world as being so corrupt that God had to fix it here. And so they came up with the doctrine that he would redo the earth. Well, that's the forerunner, incidentally, that Keelism is, of what we call premillennialism today. And that's the source out of which that idea came. Eichrodt, who wrote a book called The Theology of the Old Testament, he says, salvation will only come in a transcendental world. That's Calvinism now. They want a renovated earth. At least he did. 15th century writers, who we would call Roman Catholic, in their apocryphal books, talk about the world renovated. That's in Judith 16:17. You sisters ought to read that book, Judith. It's a good soap opera. You'll really get a tickle reading it. You and I, we went through that a little bit in GBI class about this thing. So the idea of a renovated earth is not new. It's not new. The Intertestament and uninspired writers after Christ being here all made the argument that the fire would be a renovating fire. First Enoch teaches that the Messianic kingdom will be set up after the judgment. And I said that earlier. The Jews thought he would come and then set up the kingdom when he came, and they didn't do it, and so they got all upset with him. And so the idea was, if a man can be purified, the earth can be too. Rabbinic literature all held the idea of a purified creation. Greco-Roman literature, not Jewish, but Gentile. Stoics, let me quote Philo. He says, we Stoics are of the opinion that there will be a fire which takes possession of the universe and changes all things, but then it fades and sinks, and when the fire is extinguished, Nothing is left in nature except moisture in which lies the hope of the new world to come. Just like a renovated forest after a fire. That's Stoicism, Greco-Roman, not Bible. The desire for a new heaven and a new earth, and this is my opinion now, is not a shallow longing in Jewish history, but also one the pagans had. Why? They're all carnal. They want to live here. Are the church fathers on that one? Can I stay right on that? Sure. Some church fathers held the view of a renovated earth. And anyone opposed to that view back then argued that 2 Peter was not canonical, didn't even belong. And so they were either saying he taught a renovated earth or his book doesn't even belong in the Bible, both of them being wrong, of course. And I mentioned it earlier, but Eusebius noted that an eternal being can do whatever he wants with his creation, even renovated. And Ecumenius, you ought to spell this guy's name sometime. I ought to give that in a spelling test. In his commentary on 2 Peter, he takes the view of the renovated earth. So these guys have not come up with something new. This is as old as the Intertestament period. It's based in carnality, and I want to look quickly now at some of the Bible ideas and verses that are contradicted by this view. Is that where I am? Number one, what they need here is a recreation after Judgment Day. But Peter announces annihilation prior to judgment. And not one of the 4 biblical passages that I mentioned that uses the new heavens and the new earth speaks of a recreation. It speaks of a change. Something totally different. And aionios basileia. Something completely different from the old one. Then this term new, kainos, means new as unique or new in time. And in Isaiah 65:17 and 66:22, we know Isaiah was not referring to a time post-history. He was using that phrase to refer to a time in history, a time when the church would be established. So you cannot argue that the new heavens and the new earth always means something after history. He used it there for something pre-history, or not post-history, but in history. But the renovation earth enthusiasts are arguing that this phrase means a newly created situation after the earth is burned up. But God did newly create the earth, the church from Judaism. But you had a completely new situation within history, according to those verses. Third point, what happened to the wicked who were destroyed by the flood? Were they recreated then later? According to this view, they have to be. Because their view is that this phrase means renovation. We have enough wicked, Lord, please don't renovate anymore. Send them wherever they're going, 2 Peter 2. This one, if I didn't know any other verse but this one, I'd know these folks are wrong. This is 1 Thessalonians 4:17. The dead in Christ shall rise. Rise? That sounds like they're going up first. And we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them. Oh, what a day that is. People going right up in the air. To meet the Lord in the air. But then we'd have to come back here. But that's not what the book says. Paul said, there, where? Up there shall we ever be with the Lord. That's not down here. That's up there. Oh, I look forward to that day. I'm tired of down here. Taxes, broken pipes, Floors need repairing. Tiles need repair. I'm tired of this place. I want to go up there. No taxes, don't have to build my house. It's already built. And it's a big room. King James translators got so carried away they said it was a mansion, so I'm glad of that. Then, let's go to John 14. Oh my. He's sitting in the room where they have the Last Supper. John chapter 13, 14, 15, and 16. They're all there together. One leaves to go betray him, but there are initially 13 men sitting around the table. And he's telling them, they're going to put me to death. And they are filled with sorrow. In fact, after the supper, when they got to the garden, he took Peter, James, and John into the garden, got off away from them about the distance you can throw a stone, and they went to sleep crying. Luke says they slept for sorrow. They're in the garden crying over what they're hearing, what they know. He's leaving us. But he turned to them and he said, now, don't let your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told, where's his Father's house? Stephen, where is that? Here? I mean, he'd have to tell them, I'll be back and fix your house here. It's not what he said. He said, in my Father's house right now are many mansions. He didn't say he had to go build a mansion. He said he had to go prepare it. My wife does that every time we have company. She prepares the house. Don't you do that? She doesn't have to build the house. She just has to get it ready. He's going to get it ready. How? Dying on the cross. He said, I'm going. And where I am, where are you going? Here? There you may be also. And the disciples said, we don't know where you're going. How can we know the way? Well, it's right here, he should have said. Just a renovated earth, going to live here. Come on. And not only that, when I come back, I'll just live here with you. Anybody see anything wrong with this idea of a renovated earth? Where are the dead now? Somebody tell me where the dead are right now. Lying in a box? Because there's no place to go, according to this doctrine. You buried Grandma, she's still there. Look at 2 Corinthians 12. I knew a man in Christ about 12 years ago. Whether in or out of the body, I cannot tell. The same caught up into the third heaven. Where is that? The Jews had a four-heaven cosmology. The place where their head was. The place where the stars are. The place where paradise is. And then the place where God is. Where did Paul go? If that place doesn't exist, it has to be recreated after the judgment. Where did he go? Was he lying? I got in a discussion with the preacher at Minor Memorial Methodist one year. He's a premillennialist. And I tried to show him that the Bible said the kingdom of God was here now, and I used Colossians 1:13. He hath translated us into the kingdom of his dear Son, and that preacher said, oh, that's when Paul went up into the third heaven. And I said, who went with him? It says us. Well, he didn't quite get that point, I guess. He still believes it. Is there a real hell? Is that the one? Is there a real hell? Right now? Where are those angels that are chained in Tartarus? Where is that? 2 Peter 2:4. Jesus said that heaven and earth shall pass away. Watch it. Heaven and earth shall pass away. Watch it. Come on, Mark. Watch it. But my word shall, come on, not pass away. What happened to the heaven and the earth? Are they eternal, or is his word? Just thought I'd ask. Which one of those two is eternal? The regeneration occurs in this age. Open your Bible, please, to Romans 8. And they are really confused about this passage. And the sad part of that is a lot of them studied Romans under me, so you know how bad a teacher I am. Verse 18. For I reckon, Paul was from Texas, that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed to usward. For the earnest expectation of the, and the American Standard has creation, unfortunately. This word is K-T-I-S-I-S. Katesis. It's translated creature in the King James. But they have assumed that Paul's saying that the creation will be recreated from this passage. Let's read. I'm reading the American Standard. Shall be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the liberty of the glory of the children of God. See, Keith, the creation is going to be redone at the judgment. Don't you understand? That's not what he's talking about. He'll tell us what he means by this word in just a moment. But then he uses verse 22, the creation as an illustration of the fact that we've seen resurrection every time we've seen the leaves come back to the tree. We've seen it. We've seen the creation grown in the wintertime. I've got trees in my yard right now. Look like they're dead. They are. They're not. Anybody needs any firewood, incidentally, you can cut down a couple of them. He said, we've seen that. We know what it means to be having a recreation or a resurrection. But he said, none of that, but we apostles want this thing. Look at verse 23. But ourselves also, the apostles want this thing. Whatever it was that the sons of God wanted and the creature wanted, the apostles want. What is it? Who have the first fruits of the Spirit. We're miraculously endowed. We still want this day. Even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for our adoption, to wit, here is your creature that's going to be redone, the redemption of our body. He's not talking about a recreation of the earth or a recreation of me, but a recreation of my body, a new place for my soul. My body will be raised one day. To go where? Let's go to Revelation 21:1. Is that up there? The Apostle John, as I mentioned earlier, saw a new heavens and a new earth. He saw that new heavens and new earth descending from heaven. Revelation 21:2. So, whatever exists now, come on, can't be descending from heaven. It can't be this earth descending from heaven to be changed. It's a new one. But notice what's outside of this city that he saw. Revelation 22:15. Outside of this city are dogs and whoremongers, the wicked. Well, I've been asking all afternoon, where did the wicked go? Well, they're living right outside the city. They're getting ready to invade, I guess. They don't have any place. But they've got a problem with this whole view, because 2 Peter 3:13 still says that righteousness dwells in the new heavens and new earth, not dogs and whoremongers. The wicked are not literally here on some new earth, living outside our cities. That's impossible. What's happened is they've taken a phrase, new heaven and new earth, and tried to make a literal application, and that's the basic problem with this whole view. You can't take that which is figurative, can you, Bill, and make it literal. One of our first lessons in hermeneutics is that you don't take the figurative and make it literal. That's what Max King did with the Bible. He took the figurative, made it literal, came up with the idea that Jesus came in AD 70, and so the kingdom's done. No more kingdom. He came in AD 70, according to Max King. Yet these guys who teach this doctrine still marry, still take the Lord's Supper, and so on. So they violate King's own theory. But these fellows have taken the figurative phrase, new heavens and new earth, and said that's literal. Well, let me tell you what happens to your new heavens. It will burn up with crackling heat. And one last thought from 2 Peter 3:10. I want you to write this in your notes, students. This is a question in the Greek. And even though there's a manuscript difficulty, some manuscripts say pass away and so on, and burned up is translated discovered in those texts. Discovered. But it's a question. So if you had took the view, will the earth be discovered? The answer would be no, because you can't find it. So even if you took the view that it has to be the word discovered there instead of burned up, you still have the problem with the question. You could translate that word found. Will the earth be found? No, and neither will the wicked. That's the point. Because you've got a brand new situation, folks. The variant manuscript evidence is not a problem once I realize that this is a question. Will the earth be found? Answer, no. I'm not a fan of Facebook. I think we're getting a lot of people in trouble on that thing, even in the church. And I notice these guys are using Facebook and other things like it to push this doctrine. So when my right eye offends me, I pluck it out. When my right hand offends me, I cut it off. I don't use Facebook. Something comes up on Facebook on my computer, it's deleted. I don't have time to deal with nonsense. And when men, sadly, some of our own graduates, use the verse incorrectly and won't listen to reason, what can you do? You can ask them that question. When we meet the Lord in the air, how long will we be there? What happens to the heaven? Crackling fire. And the earth, coordinating conjunction. Whatever happens to the heaven happens to the earth. When you meet these fellows, you show them this is a figure of speech here, and it's used in 4 different passages for different reasons. It's not literal, new heavens and new earth. It's a phrase about a new situation, completely different from the old one. And Ionios, Basileia. And besides that, Peter's asking you a question there. Will the earth be found? No. It saddens me in a lot of ways. A whole lot of ways. To deal with this. It should be so simple when you think about the conversation at the Last Supper. I go where? To prepare a place for you.